What's going on, everybody? This is a bonus edition of Catfish on Ice, episode 191. We're going to keep this thing rolling here. We got a lot of questions about the newcomers on the Nashville Predators roster, including the big one, Ryan O'Reilly, and of course, Luke Schenn. So what better time to bring on a Maple Leafs writer and cover of the team? That is Peter Baracchini of Sticks in the Six podcast, part of the Hockey Podcast Network family. What's going on, Peter?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Yeah, it was really exciting, but kind of disappointing as well to see O'Reilly and Schenn go, but they're going to a great market in Nashville. That is definitely for sure, and I'm looking forward to talking about them with you.
Well, man, I cannot wait to ask you what we're in for here with these two locker room leaders. That's all I see is locker room leaders. I know a ton about Ryan O'Reilly. He played in the Central Division for the Blues all those years and was just terrorized the Nashville Predators and the rest of the Central Division when the Blues finally broke their Stanley Cup drought. And then Luke Schenn is a very well-respected journeyman around the league, so we want to learn about him as well. And, of course, Peter, I want to start this off, first of all, by asking you, you had the privilege to cover the NHL Draft just recently down in Nashville and my hometown, the town I love. I do live down here in Florida now, but Nashville is always going to be home and always going to love it. So I want to ask about your experience down in Nashville covering the draft.
Oh man, where do I begin? It was really fun. It was definitely a whirlwind because, obviously it was kind of funny because as soon as I got on my flight, I went down there. As soon as I got off, all of a sudden the Pierre-Luc Dubois news broke, and it was just like as soon as that was the first thing when I got into Nashville. NHL news nonstop. But overall, like the city was fantastic. I mean, the nightlife, the concerts, the shows, it's buzzing nonstop. And I said that basically recollecting everything that I've remember from Nashville. It's always buzzing nonstop until 3:00 in the morning. You hear the music, you hear the bar life, everything is just fantastic. And even the city itself too, everything is in close proximity. The Country Music Hall of Fame, the Titans, Tennessee Titans Stadium is just across the bridge over there. I got to see that a bit. Obviously, no football going on, but to get into sites was just absolutely amazing, and to cover the draft itself for the Hockey Writers was absolutely phenomenal. And it's I was in Montreal last year. I was in Nashville this year, so I'm hoping that next year would be a three-peat wherever the location may be. But yeah, Nashville is definitely one of the best places that I've been to. That's for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad Nashville was a good host, as they usually are. And I was down there as well. I wasn't on press row covering it, but I was there in person, and definitely was awesome to see all the different teams represented. I saw fans from all across the NHL landscape. That's always one of the most fun things about going to a draft, is seeing all the different fans representing their team sweaters. So that was cool. And there was so much buzz around this draft in particular, not just because of Connor Bedard, but just because of the draft class in general had so much top five talent in it. We saw players going way outside the top 10 that should be top 5 talent. There wasn't a consensus on any of these mock drafts. Did you get a sense of how exciting that was on the floor covering it, not just for the Leafs, but just in general?
Yeah, as soon as the draft got closer, there was a lot of unpredictability considering what was going to happen with Chicago. I mean, Connor Bedard was going number 1 overall. Personally, a lot of my rankings and a lot of everybody else, Adam Fantilli was the consensus number 2. Leo Carlson was not necessarily the consensus, but a lot of them had him 3rd or within that 3 to 5 range. And I thought that, Anaheim Ducks, a lot was going to ride on what was going to happen with them. And there was a lot of talk on the draft floor that the Ducks were going for Leo Carlson right then and there, as opposed to Adam Fantilli, which, I mean, is a bit of a shock considering how much upside in offensive awareness and how much of a physical game that Fantilli plays. But it made sense for the Ducks to go after Leo Carlson. It was really it really was a difficult decision. Do you want sort of a two-way game aspect that Carlson already has developed, or the high-end skill that Fantilli had? There was maybe a bit of uncertainty as well if he was going to stay with the team or head back to college. We didn't know that. But yeah, after that, it was just, a little bit more of a shock after that. Reinbacher going to Montreal. Michkov, we kind of got a sense that he would fall either to the Flyers or Washington Capitals. We didn't think he would fall farther then. Oliver Moore, I thought, was a player that should be within the top 15. He fell close to the top 20. Again, Chicago basically with a steal right there. Easton Cowan jumping in for the Maple Leafs. David Edstrom, there was a sense that he was probably going to go in the first round, but still a bit of a shock as well, considering some of the names that were available as well. But yeah, throughout that whole entire draft class in the first round too, I mean, it was deep for a reason because you had a lot of first round talent going into the second round talent going into first. So, again, like you said, it speaks to volumes of how deep of a class this year was, because I started to get a little bit of a sense of where I think players may go. That wasn't the case at all. And I'm pretty sure
it was so hard. Even for the biggest experts, it was so hard to figure it out. I don't even think the GMs knew exactly how it was going to unfold. That's how exciting this draft was. I mean, Matvei Michkov was the one that I felt like was the wild card that would shake things up a little bit. But then Montreal takes Reinbacher, like you said, which was a little bit of a surprise. And, of course, you're on a Predators podcast here. And again, welcome, Peter of the Sticks on the Six podcast, part of our Hockey Podcast Network family. And we're happy to have you here. We're about to get into Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Schenn, who played for the Maple Leafs this past season, and the Predators, of course, picked him up in free agency a little bit out of nowhere. I don't think anyone expected Ryan O'Reilly to go to the Predators of all teams. But before we get into that, I want to round out a little bit of this draft segment reflecting on it. Since you do cover the draft, Peter, and you're into, a lot about these prospects, how do you feel about the Predators and their number 15 pick of Matthew Wood?
Yeah, I thought it was a great pick. I mean, Wood definitely solidified himself as a potential top 15 prospect. He really improved his draft stock at that U18 tournament where, he led Team Canada I believe he led with Team Canada or was second. I believe Macklin Celebrini was first in team scoring, but Matthew Wood was definitely in the top 3 in production for Team Canada there. And you got a sense of where his offensive game was at, his shot, his ability to get into the open ice. He plays with a bit of, he has a great sense of where to be on the ice. That is the one thing that stands out the most. His wrist shot is just absolutely phenomenal. A lot of knock on his skating, which, is always something big, but always something that players can improve on, especially at that young of an age.
Exactly, yeah.
But the way that he was still able to move and still get into the open ice and, work give and goes, he has that mindset and awareness of where to be. And that was a really good pickup by the Predators because, they've got a relatively good prospect pool in the makings right now. Obviously, Luca Evangelista is making the jump up. You have Joaquin Kemo, who fell at the 2022 draft of them, and he's a very great sharpshooter. Fyodor Svechkov, Zachary Leroux, who plays with that edge. Igor Afanaseyev is looking like a good late round selection. Jack Mateer on the fence. So you got, and even Luke Prokop as well. You got a good balance throughout the whole entire lineup of, high-end skilled, smart two-way players, but at the same time, you got a really good finisher and goal scorer in Matthew Wood right there.
Nice. All right. Love it. All right. Let's move along here. Let's move past the NHL draft as we've got Peter Baracchini of the Sticks on the Six podcast covers the Maple Leafs. So we've got to ask you. I cannot wait to ask you this because I know it's hard for you, and I'm sorry that I'm putting you through this. But Maple Leafs fans are going to be interested in this, and definitely Predators fans for our podcast are going to be really interested right now. And the Ryan O'Reilly signing, okay? So I'm seeing this. I'm sure you've already seen this, Peter, but I'm seeing some rumblings here that Ryan O'Reilly could not handle the pressure or didn't want to have to deal with the pressure that obviously comes with playing in the Toronto Maple Leafs market. I mean, it is like the equivalent of playing for the New York Yankees in baseball. I mean, it is the mecca of hockey, and there is insane pressure that's put against any top player that plays in that market. So I'm seeing there's been TSN I'm reading this article that apparently TSN, Brian Hayes, and Frankie Corrado had some interesting comments here. Maybe they were speculating, but they say speaking with someone close to his camp, it wasn't overly comfortable him being a Maple Leaf. I don't think that's his DNA. First of all, tell us, Peter, what are we getting in Ryan O'Reilly? I know Predators fans have seen him play for the St. Louis Blues, so we know who he is. We know he's a winner. We know he's a leader, but former Conn Smythe winner. But tell us the overall feeling about losing a player like that from the Maple Leafs camp, and just how do you feel about those pretty revealing comments there from TSN about how maybe he just could not handle the pressure playing in Toronto?
Yeah, I'm going to answer the second part first because not everyone is cut out for the Toronto market. We've seen players come and go. We've even heard players even in the past even say that, Toronto's very cutthroat. They're very, very critical of every little thing that you do. And we see it time and time again with everything that happens. If a player doesn't meet expectations, but Ryan O'Reilly met expectations very well coming in, being a middle six centerman, second, third line. He was coming in to play a role that the Maple Leafs needed him to, whether it was on the second line or the third line. He did his job. And I felt optimistic that maybe he would resign because he had that comment during the after he got traded, where there was that interaction with his dad where it's just like, what if I'm able to win this or bring a Stanley Cup to Toronto? How great would that be? And obviously that would be a great feeling. So his mindset was there and he wanted to do the best that he can to help this team succeed. And lo and behold, he was a big factor in that Tampa Bay Lightning series to get the Maple Leafs set to actually win a round. And it was, I think that, some players just aren't cut out for it. And maybe he started to feel a little bit of a pressure because maybe he felt that he wanted to come in and do the best that he can. And he did, but maybe the goal wasn't there and it just fell short. And maybe something clicked afterwards because it wasn't about money. It wasn't about term because the Maple Leafs are offering the same thing. And if it was him not being suited for the limelight, it's totally fine. I totally get that. We want the player to be happy in a mental state and a overall state as well with their well-being. And if the Preds are a perfect fit for them, that's great because, like you said, they're getting a really great leader, strong presence, vocal presence on and off the ice. A guy is willing to do whatever it takes to win. I mean, you've seen it time and time again what he did with the Blues during that season where outside of a playoff spot, I'm pretty sure he was one of the vocal leaders on that team to help get them in gear and help win the Stanley Cup right then and there because of, 23 points in 26 games. That definitely is Conn Smythe worthy. But yeah, I think it's just, he needs to be happy. Like the player wants to be happy. They picked the destination first and foremost. And I'm really excited to see what he could do for the Preds because he was definitely a player that came in, made a significant impact on the team for the Maple Leafs. And I don't think the Predators are. See, it's weird because they're in that weird stage where they feel like they're a playoff contender.
It's so weird. I don't even know how to make sense of it, man. Yeah, I really don't.
They're on the teeter of playoffs, but also on the verge of missing out on the playoffs. But if you need someone to get this team in gear, Ryan O'Reilly is definitely that guy to help motivate a young group going forward.
Well, also, I love to hear that. And also, there's all these rumblings going around. It's pretty much the writing on the wall here in Nashville with Barry Trotz taking over as the new general manager that this is really kind of damning on Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson as not great culture guys. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not saying for sure that's what it is, but it seems to be that way, that the Predators would go through all this trouble to buy out Matt Duchene, which it's going to hit them hard against the cap space starting next season. So you go through all this trouble to take out a 43 goal scorer from one year removed to go out and get a Ryan O'Reilly. Initially, when I saw the day before free agency that Matt Duchene was bought out, I thought this was a clear white flag from Trotz that he's committed to maybe not being that great for a couple seasons and letting these young kids play and get their growing pains out of the way. But then they go out and get that short-term cap space to get a Ryan O'Reilly for $4.5 million. Do you think that's a pretty good AAV for a guy like Ryan O'Reilly from the Predators standpoint, since they did have the money to spend?
Yeah, considering they had the cap space, that definitely is, good value for Ryan O'Reilly. Obviously, two-way center that could probably at least put up still 50 points right now. That to me is good value right then and there. Obviously, he's getting up there in age. He wasn't the quickest skater as we've seen from my time with the Maple Leafs as well, or even watching him with the Sabres and even with the St. Louis Blues as well. He's not that quick, but he makes up for that with his smarts and his awareness. So the fact that they had the room to bring him in and be that vocal presence and be that leader on the ice, I think it's telling of the direction that Trotz wants to go, because it's been a while since he's been behind the Predators bench, because he went to the Capitals. He went to the Islanders after that. So it's been some time since he's been with the Predators organization, but I think he has a vision and mindset of what he wants his team to be like. And maybe they were going a different direction from what they had with Ryan Johansson and Matthew Duchene, because even then, at certain points, I think with even Ryan Johansson too, he wasn't quite living up to that contract, which forced them to trade him as well and eat some of that salary cap with his contract. I think that it definitely is, in the best mindset, because we know Barry Trotz has a great hockey mind behind the bench, and for him to have this sort of presence from up top now instead of being behind the bench, I think it's going to go well for the Predators because of how well he knows the team, the organization, and the direction that he wants his team to go. So getting Ryan O'Reilly is definitely a great first step.
Yeah. Well, so the Ryan O'Reilly thing, it didn't take me too long to make sense of it when it happened, like literally 15 minutes into the opening of free agency. It was announced all over the airwaves that Ryan O'Reilly was signing with the Predators, which was, it didn't take me too long to make sense of it, because you've got a predominantly very young and inexperienced forward core for the Predators. And so you want a guy like that to get in there and teach that culture that we know Ryan O'Reilly has. And Trotz is throwing around the word culture a lot. So it makes sense. But let's move to another former Leaf that also has been signed by the Predators in free agency. And it's one that I'm starting to come around on it, but I'm still having a hard time make sense of it. Maybe from someone like you, Peter, from the outside looking in, who covers the Leafs, maybe you can make sense for me. And that is Luke Schenn, also signed by the Predators, a journeyman defenseman. He's played for a lot of teams, but he's been on winning teams. The guy led the league in hits this past year, and the Predators are no stranger to having guys who can lay out the hits. I don't think hits really get Predators fans going anymore, because we've always been that type of team that can have plenty of guys out there who can lay the lumber out there. What else are we getting out of Luke Schenn, and what are your thoughts on him? And do you think that's even a good fit for the Predators?
Yeah, the fit kind of really threw me by surprise too, because he was definitely kind of like Ryan O'Reilly, one player that I thought that the Maple Leafs could try and bring back as well. And as you're showing right now, he led the league in hits for a reason. They call him the human eraser because he has no problem laying the body. He has no problem, pushing opponents off the puck, making a big time hit on the open ice or along the boards. There's always he has a great mindset of when to stand up and make a hit, and he doesn't get out of position doing so. That to me is very big, where he doesn't put anyone at risk in terms of like an odd man rush going the other way, 2-on-1, what have you. He's very defensively minded, and he's very strong in regards to that. In terms of like the actual contract itself, I still think it's a bit too rich. I mean, obviously players look for a pay raise. They want to get the best value. It's totally fine. But for me, at 2.75, because the offense has dwindled significantly for Schenn. And then again, he did have 21 points with the Vancouver Canucks, 1 goal with the Maple Leafs, and 1 assist in the playoffs. But he looks like he's probably going to be playing more minutes this time around than maybe elsewhere as well. I think there's something to look forward to that, because if you look at their depth chart right now, computer.
Well, I personally see him
seized up a bit, but if you have Roman Josi and Ryan McDonough on the left-hand side, you have Barry and Schenn on the right. So you could expect that Luke Schenn is going to be playing probably top 4 minutes at this point as well.
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about that Peter, with me. I actually think he's going to be thrown in there as a third pairing defenseman. Personally, I could be wrong. There's a lot to sort out here. The Preds have a pretty good decor already before they signed Luke Schenn. I didn't think that was this team's problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally not being able to score goals from your forward core. And they obviously dealt with a ton of injuries, but I'm not going to ever use that excuse. So the reason why Luke Schenn confuses me is I don't know if there was a major need to get him, because I see your top four defensemen being definitely Roman Josi, Ryan McDonough, and then you've got Tyson Barrie, who very likely might be trade bait at this point. Definitely at the 2024 deadline, they're going to dangle Tyson Barrie out there most likely. And then you have Alexander Carrier, who is still very young and was just re-signed as an RFA. So I don't see how Luke Schenn's going to take minutes away from a young Alexander Carrier that clearly the franchise wants to invest in, and just went through the negotiations to re-sign him. So I love Luke Schenn as a third pairing defenseman. But as you just said, Peter, and I totally agree, 2.75 for a third pairing defenseman is a little rich for my blood.
Yeah. and that's the reason why the Maple Leafs didn't resign him. Because if they were trying to resign him at around 1.1, 1.2, I could totally understand that, because that's fair, given where he's going to be on the depth chart with the Maple Leafs. And even so with the Blue Jackets as well, because there's also hope that Dante Fabro can still come around and be a strong pillar on the right side as well, in regards to Carrier as well. But yeah, I mean, similar to Justin Hall as well, who left and got a big pay raise in Detroit. Very, very wary on that. And it was kind of a good thing the Maple Leafs let him walk, because didn't quite fit their plans of where the money wanted to be allocated in terms of that. And yeah, you need to have balance, and I understand that. And I think the Predators have the fact that, it's for 3 years. I think it's something that they can eat up for the time being, where they know that they're going to be in middle of the pack as well. I think that mindset is going to be very telling for them, where this is like a transitional process where you need to fill it up roster spots with players that can get the job done. And Schenn can definitely get the job done. Whether it's going to be offensively, that remains to be seen, but defensively, getting into the lanes, shot blocking, hitting, breaking up plays, defending against the rush, that's his MO. And I think that if you're able to do that, where he does break up a play, forwards could swoop in and transition the other way. So I think that with the speed that the Predators have up front, someone like that to break up plays, I think is going to be a very good balance from the defense with Schenn, and even for the forwards or whoever the forward line is going to be with that third pairing.
To protect UC Saros. I mean, ultimately, you need guys who are going to go to battle and block shots, get in shot lanes, do the things that Luke Schenn is going to do for you as an experienced veteran. So that part of it, I totally understand. I'm just, as we've already alluded to, it's very hard to figure out who the Predators actually are. Mm-hmm. They are throwing us so many curveballs, and you have a new GM, you have a new head coach in Andrew Burnett. Good luck figuring out the riddle that is the Nashville Predators right now. We really just don't know, but it's going to make for some fun talk there coming into the season. All right, I want to move along here. This is Peter Baracchini of the Sticks on the Six podcast, covering the Maple Leafs, part of our Hockey Podcast Network family, joining for this bonus edition of Catfish on Ice episode 191. Want to shift to your franchise player, one of the best players in the NHL outside of Connor McDavid, maybe. But such a fun, maybe such a fun player to watch. I mean, I love anytime Auston Matthews is on the ice, I'm going to definitely watch it. I got to ask you, and maybe I'm just completely overlooking this, and you follow it more closely than I do, obviously. What's going on with Auston Matthews? Why does he not have a new deal yet? Are you even sweating it? Is it not a big deal? It's a much ado about nothing. What does a new deal look like for him? What's the sense around Auston Matthews in Toronto right now and getting that new deal figured out?
Yeah, I'm not worried about the deal at all. I mean, everyone was like, up in arms that, we're getting a free agency, and Matthews and even William Nylander, for that matter, still haven't signed their contract, but they couldn't sign that contract anyways. Right now is when their no movement clause kicks in, but they couldn't sign a deal until July 1st. Now that we're past that, it seems like things are not necessarily picking up steam, but the comments that Brad Treliving are making are reassuring that maybe Auston Matthews is still going to stay in the fold. I can't see him leaving otherwise. He remains committed to this team, and even Frank Saravalli during the draft, I saw him say that Matthews is committed to doing whatever this team needs, even if it means taking less of a salary. Now, whether that's going to be around the same $11 million, because it seems like money is not the issue for him at this point anymore. I think that mindset is he doesn't want to be the highest paid player in the league. He wants to win. And I think if you're still going to have Matthews at around 11, maybe even around 12 million, I think that's pretty ideal if you're the Maple Leafs, because considering that he's a 60 goal scorer, Hart Trophy MVP, he's definitely made his mark as one of the top players in this league, and you can't let him out of your sight because he is the franchise. He is the face of the team right now, and he's your important guy. I don't think that there is any concern at all with the Maple Leafs, especially in regards to Auston Matthews, because they know that he's a priority. Treliving's gone and talked to him. They've had conversations with his rep and agent as well. So the lines of communication are still there. I don't think that it's going to be one where we're looking at worst case scenario, because I think he's going to be the one that's going to stay in the fold.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would be just crazy wild if for some reason he was not brought back after next season to hit free agency. I don't see it happening either, but you just never know. Honestly, you really don't ever know. And obviously the salary cap's expected to go up next season as well. It was basically a flat cap this offseason. So it really put GMs in a very difficult predicament to figure out how to keep players they want to keep. But as you just said, Peter, there's no way you're letting Auston Matthews go definitely top two. We can just say top two in the league. We can have the argument till the cows come home about Connor McDavid, Auston Matthews, but definitely you're not going to let Auston Matthews go, like you just said, especially out of a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs. That type of market cannot let it happen. I don't think it's going to happen either. It's just taking some time to figure out, but definitely very true there. So let's move on to the final question I got for you. This is Peter Baracchini of the 6 on the 6 podcast. It's been a really great time getting introduced to our two big additions out of free agency, and Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Schenn, who played for the Maple Leafs this past season. Talking the draft and how he covered that was amazing. All right. The Maple Leafs moved the needle for the league. I mean, there was all this talk about, are they ever going to get past the first round? Peter, full disclosure, I live down here in Tampa Bay Lightning country now. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I'm surrounded by Lightning fans. And they were sweating it when they drew the Maple Leafs in the first round again. I've made a lot of good, close connections and friends who are diehard Lightning fans, and they were not feeling confident going into that first round series rematch with the Maple Leafs. And so the Maple Leafs got that monkey off their shoulder. They got past the first round. It was cool to see. I was totally happy for your fans. Your fans deserve it. It was cool to see those. But now I got to move on here, because obviously you want to win Stanley Cups in Toronto. It's not about getting past the first round. So, I mean, it was cool to see. I was happy for the fan base, but obviously you want way more than that. So what's it looking like in 2023-24? Is it still Stanley Cup or bust? What are your expectations for the team now that we're past free agency? What's it look like, man?
Yeah, I think it's always still Stanley Cup or nothing. I mean, that's the end goal, and you can tell that they seemed elated and it seemed very confident after that Tampa Bay Lightning team where they got the monkey off their back. That was huge, and to do it against a team that knocked them out in the first round where they had a good chance to win that series as well. I mean, it meant everything. When John Tavares scored that goal, I was absolutely losing it, because you know what? It's been a long time coming. The last time they won was in 2003, 2004. I was still in elementary school at that point. So you can tell that has been a long time. And I think right now what the Florida Panthers series loss really put a damper on things, because the expectation was obviously the Maple Leafs were favorites going into that one, considering that Florida was underdogs against the Bruins, underdogs against the Leafs, and they went to the Stanley Cup final. But that series really showed that there's still some work to be done because they had no answer for the physicality of the Florida Panthers. Like their neutral zone trap, or not necessarily the trap, but their ability to transition in the neutral zone and block everything and converge and transition to offense was the reason for their success. Getting in on the forecheck, being heavy, that was the Florida Panthers mentality during that series or throughout the playoffs. Maple Leafs addressed that in free agency by bringing in guys like, obviously not so much. I mean, Ryan Reeves, yes, but he's not quick. He's not fast, but he is there to patrol and keep everyone safe and make sure that no one's going to be pushed around in this team. You brought in Tyler Bertuzzi and Max Domi, players that's
good.
Play with that edge
pickups.
As Brad Treliving said, they play with snots. They play in your face. They're gritty. They're heavy on the attack, and those are the type of players that are meant for playoff hockey. Tyler Bertuzzi rose to the occasion for the Boston Bruins, being tied with Brad Marchand in the playoffs for the team lead in points. Max Domi had 13 and 19 for Dallas en route to the conference finals for them in the West. They need that edge. They need that bite. They need that mentality that gets them further, because they had some pieces, but it didn't quite show in the playoffs, especially in their bottom six. But now you have pieces in your top six, in your middle six, and in the bottom part of your lineup right now. That's going to bode well for this team, because we've even seen that with the Vegas Golden Knights, where they're heavy on the puck. They're quick. That's the type of game that's going to win you championships. Not being fancy, not being cute at times, like we saw in that Panther series, where we saw massive giveaways and blunders by everybody, by Matthews, by Marner, by all the top players. You can't play like that in the playoffs. You got to be smart. You got to be quick, but you also got to be ready to anticipate anything. I think the Maple Leafs are now in a better spot because of those free agent acquisitions. A lot needs to happen. Still some work and some pieces that you need to bring in, but it definitely is a good sign that the mentality is changing for Brad Treliving and this team, because they need to be heavy, and that's what's going to make you successful in the playoffs.
So the additions outweigh the subtractions. You lose Michael Bunting, which was clearly a tough loss. And then, of course, we already talked about Ryan O'Reilly being lost. But the additions seem to outweigh the subtractions, is what you're saying.
In a way, yeah, because I think
it's tough to say, obviously.
It is. We need to see what happens during the regular season. But as of now, Bertuzzi seems like a better player and a more offensively talented player than Michael Bunting, who, he even in Detroit too, when he was in a top six, there were times where he was driving the line by himself, and Bunting kind of seemed like, just a complimentary piece. Bertuzzi has the speed, skill to match that of Matthews and Marner, but also the physicality that Bunting brought. I think he's an improvement over Bunting. I think Max Domi is an improvement over Alexander Kerfoot, who, again, may not hit, but he's not afraid to go in on the attack and back away from a challenge, where he's always going to be digging in on the forecheck and setting up the attack. I think you do have good additions, and I'm even going to throw in John Klingberg in there as well, where, defensive game isn't that great, but this is a very mobile defenseman who has shown flashes of brilliance with his breakouts, his ability to get shots on net. I think that's a bigger improvement than that of what we saw with Justin Hall. So you do have some pieces that improve the team over the subtractions. But again, we need to see that during the regular season, or when the season kicks off, because that's when everything's going to matter right then and there.
I mean, I got to say, on the surface, from the outside looking in, it's pretty impressive that the Maple Leafs went through losing so many players, and they stayed on the fly, and they made sure they added players to offset it. That's what a good front office does. And so the Maple Leafs are going to stick around. They're going to have a much different looking team, but they're still going to have a Stanley Cup caliber type of team. I totally feel that way for sure. Eastern Conference, I feel like is gotten way more stacked from top to bottom than the Western Conference has gotten. So obviously the path to the Stanley Cup is so difficult and so ridiculous. So we will have to wait and see exactly how that works out. But at the same time, it's been awesome having you on. This has been Peter Baracchini of the Six on the Six podcast, fellow podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network, covering the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's been a blast, and we can't wait to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate that. It was great to chat hockey with you.
It's always a blast. Sign me up anytime for that. And everyone, if you could please go down below on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We totally appreciate that. It helps out a ton. We always put out live segments of our episodes before we release the episode on the podcast platform. So you get an early look at part of the episode. You get to comment on it. You get to tell us how you feel about these awesome topics we're talking about. It may be the NHL offseason. We might be going through a little bit of a downtime here now that the draft and free agency has passed, but the hockey talk never stops. There's always something to talk about. So we will see you later on Catfish on Ice. We will round out episode 191, and we will see you later. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.